In TechForward Solutions' gleaming conference room, a seasoned account manager was about to face corporate execution. What started as a routine monthly sales review took a shocking turn when they came face to face with systematic psychological warfare. Rachel Mitchell wasn't your typical enterprise sales professional. For 8 years, she had spent her life serving as an Air Force logistics officer in combat zones, known for her methodical precision and unwavering integrity under fire. When she encountered Victoria Sterling's public humiliation regarding her stalled $800,000 deal, she had no idea she was walking into a web of corporate corruption that reached the highest levels of her company. Rachel's military-trained response that would lead to exposing fraudulent practices worth millions of dollars. What began as a personal vendetta would become a battle for the soul of enterprise sales itself. The Atlanta tech community would never be the same after one combat veteran proved that ethical business practices could triumph over institutional corruption. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights in TechForward Solutions' main conference room cast harsh shadows across the polished mahogany table, creating an arena where careers lived and died by quarterly numbers. Rachel Mitchell sat with her spine straight, hands folded precisely in her lap, a posture that had served her well during military briefings and now helped her maintain composure in corporate warfare. The monthly sales review meeting had the ritualistic feel of an execution, with Victoria Sterling presiding as both judge and executioner. "Let's move on to the Chen Industries account," Victoria announced, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who had perfected the art of public humiliation. She clicked through her presentation slides with theatrical precision, each gesture calculated for maximum impact. "Rachel, would you care to explain why an $800,000 deal has been stalled for 3 months?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Rachel felt the collective attention of her colleagues shift toward her, some curious, others relieved it wasn't their turn in the spotlight. She recognized the tactical positioning from her Air Force days: isolate the target, control the narrative, maintain psychological dominance. "The client has legitimate concerns about implementation timeline," Rachel replied, her voice steady despite the tension coiling in her chest. "Robert Chen's team needs assurance that our rollout won't disrupt their Q4 operations. I'm working with Michael to address their technical requirements." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "Working with Michael? How? Collaborative of you." She turned to address the room, transforming Rachel's methodical approach into a character flaw. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when we mistake relationship building for actual sales execution. While Rachel has been working with Michael for 3 months, our competitors have been closing deals." The words struck with surgical precision. Rachel's military training had taught her to recognize psychological warfare in all its forms. But this corporate variant was particularly insidious. Victoria wasn't just attacking her performance, she was dismantling her professional identity piece by piece, in front of colleagues who might one day determine her future at the company. "Ma'am, with respect," Rachel said, the military honorific slipping out before she could catch it. Several colleagues exchanged glances. Victoria's eyes glittered with satisfaction at the verbal stumble. "The Chen deal requires a customized integration approach. Rushing the process would compromise both our solution and their trust." "Trust." Victoria repeated the word as if it were foreign. "Rachel, let me share something with you. Trust doesn't pay for our overhead. Trust doesn't hit our quarterly targets. Trust certainly doesn't justify why you've been allocated resources that could generate actual revenue." Michael Torres shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his technical mind clearly struggling with the reduction of complex client relationships to simple numbers. Rachel caught his eye for a fraction of a second, long enough to see the solidarity there, but also the fear. Speaking up would make him Victoria's next target. "The reality," Victoria continued, advancing like a predator sensing weakness, "is that some account managers are suited for enterprise-level deals, and others—" She paused, letting the implications settle. "Others might find more success with smaller implementations, $20,000, $30,000 contracts, something more manageable." The suggestion hit Rachel like shrapnel. 3 years of building her reputation, of proving that her systematic approach could compete with the company's more aggressive sales tactics, reduced to a suggestion that she wasn't capable of handling significant deals. Around the table, her colleagues studied their hands, their phones, anything but her face. Rachel's internal response was immediate and familiar, the same cold fury that had sustained her through hostile territory overseas. But her external reaction remained controlled, professional. Years of military discipline had taught her that emotional responses were tactical errors. "I appreciate your concern," she said, each word carefully measured. "But I believe the Chen deal will close within the next 2 weeks. My approach may take longer, but it builds lasting partnerships, not just one-time transactions." Victoria's laugh was crystalline and cutting. 2 weeks. How? Optimistic. She made a note on her tablet with flourish. "Let's circle back on that timeline, shall we? Though I have to say, Rachel, your confidence is admirable. Misplaced, perhaps, but admirable." The meeting continued, but Rachel felt the shift in the room's dynamics. Victoria had accomplished her objective, publicly undermining Rachel's credibility while positioning herself as the decisive leader making tough choices. The other account managers would remember this moment, this demonstration of what happened to those who challenged the established order. As Victoria moved on to Amanda Foster's impressive quarterly numbers, Rachel found herself thinking about her Air Force days. The parallels were striking, the same power dynamics, the same use of public humiliation as a control mechanism. But in the military, at least the enemy was clearly defined. Here, the battle lines were drawn with corporate politeness and quarterly metrics. "Rachel," Victoria's voice cut through her thoughts. "Since you seem distracted, perhaps you'd like to share your insights on Amanda's approach? She's closed 4 deals this quarter using our established methodology." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Praise Amanda and undermine her own methods, or maintain her position and appear stubborn. Rachel chose a third option. "Amanda's results speak for themselves," she said simply. Different approaches work for different clients. Victoria's expression suggested this wasn't the response she'd wanted. "Different approaches," she mused. "Yes, I suppose that's one way to describe inconsistent performance." The meeting concluded with Victoria's usual motivational closing, a blend of corporate speak and veiled threats that left everyone feeling simultaneously inspired and threatened. As colleagues filed out, making careful small talk that avoided mentioning the elephant in the room, Rachel remained seated, organizing her materials with the same methodical precision she'd learned in logistics training. Michael lingered near the door, clearly wanting to say something but aware that any show of support would be noted and remembered. Rachel gave him the slightest nod, enough to convey that she understood his position, that survival sometimes required tactical silence. Alone in the conference room, Rachel allowed herself a moment of quiet fury. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, indifferent to the corporate drama that had just unfolded. She thought about David, probably finishing his shift at the hospital, dealing with real problems: sick children, worried parents, life and death decisions that made quarterly sales figures seem absurdly insignificant. But this was her battlefield now. Victoria Sterling had made it clear that Rachel's methodical approach, her military precision, her commitment to building genuine client relationships, none of it mattered in this environment. What mattered was playing the game by rules that seemed designed to reward manipulation over competence. Rachel stood, gathering her materials with deliberate care. Victoria had declared war, publicly and decisively. She'd made it clear that Rachel's position at TechForward Solutions was conditional on abandoning everything that made her effective as an account manager. The challenge was accepted. As Rachel walked toward the exit, her reflection caught in the conference room's glass walls. A woman in a navy blazer, professional and composed, but with something steel-hard in her posture that spoke of battles fought in far more dangerous places than corporate conference rooms. Victoria Sterling had chosen the wrong target for her psychological warfare. Rachel Mitchell had survived actual warfare. She wasn't about to be broken by a corporate bully with a PowerPoint presentation and a talent for public humiliation. The question wasn't whether she could weather Victoria's attacks, it was how she planned to respond to them. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but the sound felt like the beginning of something rather than an ending. 2 weeks. Rachel had given herself a deadline, but she was already thinking beyond the Chen deal. Victoria wanted a war? She'd get one. But it would be fought on Rachel's terms, with Rachel's methods, and Victoria Sterling was about to learn that underestimating a combat veteran was a tactical error she'd regret making. The door to their Buckhead townhouse closed behind Rachel with the same soft finality as the conference room, but here the sound carried different weight: relief, sanctuary, the promise of unconditional acceptance. David's voice drifted from the kitchen, humming something tuneless while he prepared dinner, and Rachel felt the familiar tug between her professional armor and the vulnerability that home demanded. "How was the sales review?" David called without turning from the stove, his pediatric nurse instincts already detecting the tension in her footsteps. After 8 years of marriage, he'd learned to read her moods like vital signs. The subtle changes in breathing, posture, the way she set down her briefcase that telegraphed everything about her day. Rachel loosened her blazer, feeling the weight of Victoria's words still pressing against her chest. "Enlightening," she said, choosing the word carefully. David turned, his expression immediately shifting from casual interest to focused concern. The same look he probably wore when a child came into the ER trying to hide their pain. "Enlightening how?" He set down his spatula, giving her his full attention. The gesture was so fundamentally David, always ready to abandon whatever he was doing to be present for someone who needed him. It was what had drawn her to him during those chaotic months after her military discharge, when civilian life felt like learning to breathe underwater. "Victoria made it clear that my methods aren't compatible with company expectations." Rachel perched on the edge of the kitchen counter, her usual spot for debriefing the day's battles. She suggested I might be more suited to smaller deals. In front of the entire team. David's jaw tightened. He'd never met Victoria Sterling, but he'd heard enough stories to recognize the name as belonging to someone who treated people like expendable resources. "What did you say?" "That I'd close the Chin deal in 2 weeks. The words came out more defiant than she'd intended, and David's expression shifted again, this time to something between admiration and worry. "Can you?" The question hung between them, honest and direct. Rachel appreciated that about David. He never offered false reassurance or empty encouragement. His support came in the form of clear-eyed assessment and unwavering belief in her capabilities, even when she doubted them herself. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I can't let her win. Not like this." David moved closer, his hands finding her shoulders. "Tell me what happened." "All of it." So she did. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush as the day's humiliation poured out. David listened without interruption, his touch steady and grounding. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Sounds familiar," he said finally. "What do you mean?" "The psychological tactics. The public humiliation. Sounds like Lieutenant Morrison." Rachel's breath caught. Lieutenant Morrison, her commanding officer during her second deployment, who'd made her life hell for 6 months before being transferred. The man who'd questioned her fitness for duty, suggested she was too emotional for logistics coordination, made her prove herself daily in ways her male counterparts never had to. "It's not the same," she said automatically, but even as the words left her mouth, she recognized the lie. The methods were identical: isolate, undermine, erode confidence through systematic attacks disguised as professional feedback. "Isn't it?" David's voice was gentle but insistent. "You came home from that deployment changed. Harder. You'd won, but something in you had shifted. I watched you build walls to protect yourself from ever being vulnerable like that again." The memory surfaced unbidden, standing in Morrison's office, being told that her emotional approach to managing supply chains was compromising mission effectiveness. The way her fellow officers had looked at her afterward, wondering if the criticism was justified. The months of second-guessing every decision, every interaction, every moment of apparent weakness. "I survived Morrison," Rachel said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You did more than survive. You excelled despite him. But look what it cost you." David's thumb traced the tension line between her eyebrows. You came home believing that showing any vulnerability was a tactical error, that caring about people was a weakness to be hidden. Rachel wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because David was right. She'd learned to present herself as invulnerable, to hide her natural empathy behind military precision. It had served her well in corporate sales, where relationships were strategic assets rather than genuine connections. Victoria isn't Morrison, she said finally. No, she's worse. Morrison was a bad leader in a high-stress environment. Victoria is a sociopath in a business suit. David's usually gentle demeanor hardened. And you're fighting on her territory, by her rules. They stood in silence, the weight of unspoken concerns settling between them. Rachel knew what David wasn't saying, that her drive to prove herself was consuming her, that their conversations had become dominated by work stress, that they'd postponed starting a family because her career demanded everything she had to give. I can't just walk away, she said, not after 3 years of building something here. I'm not suggesting you walk away. I'm suggesting you remember who you are outside of TechForward Solutions. David's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're not just a sales professional. You're not just a former Air Force officer. You're Rachel Mitchell, and you're worth more than whatever validation Victoria Sterling thinks she can withhold. The words hit deeper than any of Victoria's barbs. Because David was right, somewhere in the battle to prove her professional worth, she'd lost sight of her intrinsic value. The woman who'd survived combat deployments, who'd built a successful civilian career, who'd earned the love of a man who saw sick children recover against impossible odds, and still believed in happy endings. I'm scared, she admitted, the words barely audible. Of what? That she's right. That I'm not cut out for this level of sales. That I've been fooling myself for 3 years. David's laugh was soft but certain. Rachel, you coordinated supply lines for forward operating bases in Afghanistan. You kept soldiers alive by making sure they had what they needed when they needed it. You think managing corporate software sales is beyond your capabilities? Put that way, it did sound absurd. But corporate warfare had its own psychological weapons, its own way of making competent people doubt their fundamental abilities. Victoria made me feel like that scared lieutenant all over again, Rachel said. Standing in Morrison's office, wondering if I belonged there. But you did belong there. Just like you belong at TechForward. The question is whether TechForward deserves you. David's words carried the weight of absolute conviction. He'd watched her navigate the transition from military to civilian life, seen her master the intricacies of enterprise software sales, witnessed her build genuine relationships with clients who valued her methodical approach. 2 weeks, Rachel said, straightening her shoulders. I'll give myself 2 weeks to prove that relationship building isn't a weakness. And if you don't close the Chen deal? Quote. Rachel considered the question. Victoria would use any failure as ammunition, would probably escalate her campaign of psychological warfare. But David's support had reminded her of something crucial. Her worth wasn't determined by quarterly metrics or Victoria Sterling's approval. Then I'll find another way to win the war, she said. On my terms. David smiled, the expression carrying 8 years of shared battles and unconditional support. There's the woman I married. The one who doesn't back down from bullies, whether they're wearing combat fatigues or business suits. The kitchen timer chimed, breaking the moment. David returned to the stove, but the conversation had shifted something fundamental in Rachel's perspective. Victoria Sterling wanted a psychological war? She'd get one. But Rachel wouldn't be fighting it as a victim of corporate politics. She'd be fighting it as a combat veteran who'd learned that the most dangerous enemies were the ones who underestimated their opponents. The Starbucks in Buckhead's financial district buzzed with the controlled chaos of morning commerce. Investment advisors reviewing portfolios, real estate agents closing deals via phone, the ambient hum of Atlanta's business community conducting its daily ritual of ambition and anxiety. Rachel chose a corner table with clear sightlines to both entrances, a habit from her military days that David often teased her about, but that now felt prudent given the corporate warfare she'd stumbled into. James Parker arrived precisely on time, his silver hair and expensive suit marking him as someone who'd navigated these particular waters successfully. But his eyes held a wariness that spoke of battles fought and scars earned in the unforgiving world of enterprise sales. He'd been her informal mentor since joining TechForward, one of the few senior executives who'd understood that her military background was an asset rather than a curiosity. "You sounded stressed on the phone," James said, settling into the chair across from her. His movement was economical, purposeful, a man who'd learned not to waste energy on unnecessary gestures. Victoria Sterling's stress, I'm guessing? The directness shouldn't have surprised her. James had worked under Victoria for 2 years before leaving TechForward, and his departure had been abrupt enough to generate whispered speculation throughout the company. He'd never discussed the details, but his willingness to mentor Rachel suggested he understood the particular challenges of working under Victoria's leadership. "Yesterday's sales review," Rachel said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. "She essentially declared war, publicly questioned my competence, suggested I might be better suited to smaller deals. Made it clear that my position depends on changing everything about how I approach client relationships." James's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition, perhaps? Or the grim satisfaction of watching a predicted outcome unfold. The Chen deal? 3 months stalled. Victoria used it as ammunition to undermine my credibility in front of the entire team. Rachel paused, studying James's reaction. "You're not surprised." "I've been expecting this conversation for months." James sipped his coffee, his gaze distant. "Victoria doesn't tolerate independence. She especially doesn't tolerate subordinates who might make her look bad by succeeding where she's failed." "What do you mean?" "Your approach to sales, building genuine relationships, taking time to understand client needs, creating long-term partnerships rather than one-time transactions. It's fundamentally sound. It's also the opposite of everything Victoria represents." James's voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "She rose through the ranks by eliminating competition, not by developing it. Your success threatens her narrative about what effective sales leadership looks like." Rachel felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You're saying she's targeting me personally?" "I'm saying Victoria Sterling views any subordinate with independent thought as a threat to be neutralized." James leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Rachel, there's something you need to understand about TechForward's culture. It's not about achieving sustainable growth anymore. It's about generating quarterly numbers that look good to investors, regardless of the long-term cost." "What are you talking about?" James was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table. When he spoke, his voice carried the careful precision of someone revealing dangerous information. "Why do you think I left TechForward? You said you wanted to start your own consulting practice. That's what I told HR. The truth is more complicated." James's eyes met hers directly. "I left because I was asked to participate in practices that violated my professional ethics. Specifically, I was asked to falsify client testimonials and inflate success metrics to close deals that should never have been approved." The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. "You're saying the company is actively engaging in fraud?" "I'm saying certain individuals within the company are willing to bend rules to achieve their objectives. And those individuals have been rewarded for their flexibility." James's tone was carefully neutral, but his meaning was clear. Victoria Sterling didn't become VP of Strategic Accounts by building genuine client relationships. Rachel's mind raced, connecting dots she'd been too focused on her own problems to see. Amanda Foster's impressive quarterly numbers. The mysterious client references that always seemed just slightly too good to be true. The way certain deals closed with unusual speed, bypassing the thorough vetting process that had become standard practice. You're talking about systematic corruption. I'm talking about a culture that rewards results over methods, where asking inconvenient questions about how deals are structured is seen as lacking commitment to the team. James's expression was grim. "Rachel, you need to understand something. Your methodical approach, your insistence on ethical practices, it doesn't just threaten Victoria's authority. It threatens to expose the shortcuts that others have been taking." The coffee in Rachel's cup had gone cold, but she barely noticed. "What am I supposed to do with this information?" "Be very, very careful. Document everything. build alliances with people you trust. Michael Torres, for instance. He's one of the few technical people who still believes in doing things the right way. James's advice came with the authority of someone who'd navigated similar waters. And whatever you do, don't underestimate Victoria's willingness to destroy anyone who threatens her position. She can't just fire me without cause. James's laugh was short and bitter. Rachel, she doesn't need cause. She needs a narrative. A pattern of poor performance, difficulty working with colleagues, inability to adapt to company culture. She's already started building that narrative. With yesterday's public humiliation, the implications were staggering. Rachel had assumed her conflict with Victoria was personal, a clash of management styles and professional philosophies. But James was suggesting something far more sinister, a systematic effort to eliminate anyone who might expose the corruption that had become embedded in TechForward sales culture. "Why are you telling me this?" Rachel asked. "Because you remind me of myself 10 years ago. Competent, ethical, naive about the depths of corporate politics." James's expression softened slightly. "I had a choice when I discovered what was happening. I could have fought it, tried to expose it, risked everything to do the right thing. Instead, I chose the safe path. I left quietly, built my own practice, convinced myself that walking away was the ethical choice. And now I regret that choice every day, because the culture I walked away from is still there, still destroying good people like you." James's voice carried the weight of genuine remorse. "I can't undo my decision, but I can help you make a better one." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rachel stared out the window at the bustling street, where people hurried past with the focused intensity of those pursuing success without questioning its cost. "What would you do differently?" "I'd fight. But I'd fight smart. I'd gather evidence, build alliances, and choose my battles carefully." James reached across the table, his hand briefly covering hers. "Rachel, you have something I didn't have. Military training. You understand strategy, tactical thinking, the importance of intelligence gathering. Use those skills." Victoria made it clear that my position depends on changing my approach. Then change it, but not in the way she expects. James's smile was sharp with possibility. Become what she thinks she wants, someone focused on closing deals at any cost. But document everything. He's one of the few technical people who still believes in doing things the right way. James's advice came with the authority of someone who'd navigated similar waters. And whatever you do, don't underestimate Victoria's willingness to destroy anyone who threatens her position. She can't just fire me without cause. James's laugh was short and bitter. "Rachel, she doesn't need cause. She needs a narrative. A pattern of poor performance, difficulty working with colleagues, inability to adapt to company culture. She's already started building that narrative. With yesterday's public humiliation, the implications were staggering. Rachel had assumed her conflict with Victoria was personal, a clash of management styles and professional philosophies. But James was suggesting something far more sinister, a systematic effort to eliminate anyone who might expose the corruption that had become embedded in TechForward sales culture. "Why are you telling me this?" Rachel asked. "Because you remind me of myself 10 years ago. Competent, ethical, naive about the depths of corporate politics." James's expression softened slightly. "I had a choice when I discovered what was happening. I could have fought it, tried to expose it, risked everything to do the right thing. Instead, I chose the safe path. I left quietly, built my own practice, convinced myself that walking away was the ethical choice. And now I regret that choice every day, because the culture I walked away from is still there, still destroying good people like you." James's voice carried the weight of genuine remorse. "I can't undo my decision, but I can help you make a better one." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rachel stared out the window at the bustling street, where people hurried past with the focused intensity of those pursuing success without questioning its cost. "What would you do differently?" "I'd fight. But I'd fight smart. I'd gather evidence, build alliances, and choose my battles carefully. James reached across the table, his hand briefly covering hers. Rachel, you have something I didn't have. Military training. You understand strategy, tactical thinking, the importance of intelligence gathering. Use those skills. Victoria made it clear that my position depends on changing my approach. Then change it, but not in the way she expects. James's smile was sharp with possibility. Become what she thinks she wants, someone focused on closing deals at any cost. But document everything. Build relationships with clients who value integrity. And when the time comes, be ready to present an alternative vision of what TechForward could be. The meeting concluded with James's promise to serve as an informal advisor, someone Rachel could trust with information too sensitive for corporate channels. As they parted ways, he offered one final piece of advice. Remember, Rachel, in corporate warfare, the most dangerous opponent is the one who appears to be following orders while actually gathering intelligence. Victoria Sterling is about to learn that lesson the hard way. Walking back to her car, Rachel felt the weight of James's revelations settling over her like tactical gear. The conflict with Victoria was no longer personal. It was part of a larger battle for the soul of TechForward Solutions. And Rachel Mitchell, former Air Force logistics officer, was uniquely qualified to fight that battle. But first, she had a war to win. The clock on Rachel's laptop showed 11:47 p.m., but sleep felt impossible. David had gone to bed hours ago, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the glow of her computer screen in their home office. The conversation with James had shifted her perspective fundamentally. This wasn't just about proving Victoria wrong. It was about exposing a culture of corruption that was destroying everything she'd tried to build at TechForward. But exposing corruption required more than good intentions. It required evidence, leverage, and most importantly, success that couldn't be dismissed or undermined. The Chen deal remained stalled, Robert's concerns about implementation timeline growing more pointed with each conversation. Rachel needed something else, a victory so decisive that even Victoria couldn't diminish it. She'd been scrolling through industry publications for 2 hours, searching for prospects that might fit TechForward Solutions, when a name caught her attention: Reynolds Logistics. The company had been featured in a trade magazine article about supply chain innovation, and something about their challenges resonated with Rachel's military background. Catherine Reynolds, the company's CTO, had been quoted extensively about the difficulties of scaling their technology infrastructure to match rapid business growth. "We're growing so fast that our current systems can't keep up," she'd said. "We need solutions that can scale with us, not just patch the immediate problems." Rachel clicked through to Reynolds Logistics' website, her analytical mind automatically cataloging the company's scope and potential needs. They'd grown from a regional operation to a national player in 3 years, with expansion plans that would require significant technology investment, the kind of investment that might justify a 7-figure software implementation. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Still working? Come to bed." Rachel typed back, "Found something." 5 more minutes. But 5 minutes became an hour as she dove deeper into Reynolds Logistics' business model, their recent acquisitions, their stated technology goals. By 1:30 a.m., she'd built a comprehensive profile of their challenges and potential solutions. More importantly, she'd identified the key decision-makers and their contact information. The next morning, Rachel arrived at TechForward early, her laptop bag heavy with research materials and a carefully crafted outreach strategy. The office was still quiet, giving her time to refine her approach before the day's meetings began. She'd learned from her military experience that preparation was the difference between success and failure, and this opportunity was too important to leave to chance. Her first call to Reynolds Logistics was deflected by an assistant, but Rachel had expected that. CTOs didn't take cold calls from unknown sales representatives. Instead, she crafted a carefully worded email that referenced the trade magazine article and outlined how TechForward Solutions might address the specific challenges Catherine had mentioned. The response came faster than she'd anticipated, a brief note suggesting a phone conversation later that afternoon. Rachel spent the intervening hours reviewing every piece of information she could find about Reynolds Logistics' technology infrastructure, their competitive landscape, their growth trajectory. When Catherine Reynolds called at exactly 3 p.m., Rachel was ready. "Ms. Mitchell, I have to say, your email was refreshingly specific." Catherine's voice carried the brisk efficiency of someone who had little time for sales pitches but appreciated thoroughness. Most vendors who contact us lead with generic promises about, quote, scalable solutions without understanding what we actually do. I've found that understanding the client's real challenges is the first step toward providing meaningful solutions, Rachel replied, falling into the rhythm of genuine professional conversation. Your recent expansion into the Pacific Northwest market must have created some interesting logistical complexities. Interesting is one word for it. Catherine's tone warmed slightly. We're processing 3 times the transaction volume we handled last year, and our current system was designed for a much smaller operation. Every day feels like we're one server crash away from losing everything we've built. Rachel recognized the opening. Not just a sales opportunity, but the chance to solve a real problem for someone who genuinely needed help. Would it be useful to have a more detailed conversation about your specific requirements? I'd be happy to bring our technical team in to assess your current infrastructure and discuss potential solutions. That would be valuable. But I should warn you, we're not looking for band-aid fixes or vendor relationships. We need genuine partnerships with companies that understand our business model and can grow with us. The words could have been written by Rachel herself. Catherine Reynolds wasn't just a potential client. She was someone who shared Rachel's philosophy about building lasting business relationships based on mutual value rather than transactional exchanges. I appreciate that approach, Rachel said. In my experience, the most successful implementations happen when vendor and client work together as partners rather than adversaries. Would next week be too soon for an initial assessment meeting? Next week would be perfect. And Ms. Mitchell, I hope you're not planning to bring a team of generic sales representatives. I'd rather work with people who understand both the technical and business sides of what we're trying to accomplish. I was thinking of bringing our senior technical architect, Michael Torres. He's both technically brilliant and genuinely interested in solving complex problems rather than just making sales quotas. Excellent. I look forward to meeting both of you. Rachel hung up the phone feeling something she hadn't experienced in months. Genuine excitement about the work itself, rather than just the political implications of success. Catherine Reynolds represented everything she'd hoped to find in enterprise sales. A client who valued substance over style, who understood that technology solutions required genuine partnership, who was willing to invest in long-term relationships rather than short-term fixes. But even as she scheduled the meeting and began outlining her approach, Rachel was aware of the larger context. Victoria Sterling had made it clear that Rachel's position depended on her ability to close significant deals using acceptable methods. The Reynolds opportunity represented a chance to prove that relationship-based selling could generate results that satisfied even the most aggressive sales targets. Michael Torres appeared in her office doorway, his expression curious. "I overheard your phone call. Reynolds Logistics? Potential client. Major technology scaling challenges. Rapid growth, looking for genuine partnerships rather than vendor relationships." Rachel gestured toward the research materials scattered across her desk. "I'm thinking this could be exactly what we need. What's their budget range?" Rachel's smile was sharp with possibility. "Based on their growth trajectory and stated needs? Potentially north of $2 million. Quote dot. Michael's eyebrows rose. $2 million? Rachel, that would be the largest single deal in the company's history. I know. Rachel's voice carried the same determined focus that had served her well in military logistics. Victoria Sterling thinks my approach can't generate significant results. Catherine Reynolds is going to help me prove her wrong. But even as she spoke the words, Rachel was thinking about James Parker's warnings. A deal this size would attract attention throughout TechForward's organization. It would validate her methods, but it would also make her an even bigger target for those who preferred the existing culture of shortcuts and questionable practices. Still, the opportunity was too significant to ignore. Rachel Mitchell had been challenged to prove her worth in terms that corporate leadership could understand. Catherine Reynolds had just given her the chance to do exactly that. The war with Victoria Sterling was about to escalate. But for the first time since the humiliation in the conference room, Rachel felt like she was fighting from a position of strength rather than desperation. The Reynolds Logistics headquarters occupied a gleaming glass tower in Midtown Atlanta, its lobby buzzing with the controlled energy of a company experiencing rapid growth. Rachel and Michael signed in at the security desk, their visitor badges marking them as potential partners in Reynolds' next phase of expansion. As they waited for Catherine Reynolds to collect them, Rachel noticed the subtle signs of organizational strain. Employees moving with the hurried pace of people trying to keep up with overwhelming demand, temporary workstations scattered throughout the lobby, the general atmosphere of a company outgrowing its infrastructure in real time. "Reminds me of a forward operating base during surge operations," Rachel murmured to Michael. "Everyone working at maximum capacity, but the systems aren't designed for this level of activity." Michael nodded, his technical mind already cataloging the visible signs of IT stress. "Look at the cable management behind that reception desk. Classic rapid expansion. They're adding capacity faster than they can properly integrate it." Catherine Reynolds appeared with the brisk efficiency Rachel had come to expect from their phone conversations. She was younger than Rachel had anticipated, probably early 40s. With the focused intensity of someone who'd built her career on making technology work for business objectives rather than the other way around. Her handshake was firm, her assessment of both visitors swift and direct. "Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Torres, thank you for coming in." Catherine gestured toward the elevator bank. "I thought we'd start with a tour of our current operations, then discuss where we're headed. Fair warning, what you're about to see might look like controlled chaos, but it's actually uncontrolled chaos that we're managing through sheer force of will." The tour revealed exactly what Rachel had expected, a company whose success had outpaced its technology infrastructure. Servers jury-rigged to handle double their designed capacity, software systems integrated through custom patches that required constant maintenance, employees working around technological limitations through increasingly creative manual processes. It was impressive in its scope, concerning in its sustainability. "We're processing about 40,000 transactions per day," Catherine explained as they watched the operations center. "Our system was designed for 15,000. We've been scaling through hardware additions and custom code, but we're reaching the limits of what's possible with our current architecture." Michael was taking notes, his technical background allowing him to understand the specific challenges in ways that most sales representatives couldn't. "What's your biggest pain point? Processing speed, data integrity, or system reliability?" "All three, but if I had to prioritize, it's system reliability. We can work around slow processing and we've got data verification protocols, but when the system goes down, we lose everything until it's back online." Catherine's expression was grim. "Last month, we had a 6-hour outage that cost us nearly $200,000 in delayed shipments and customer service issues." Rachel recognized the opening. What would a solution need to provide to address those core issues? Redundancy, scalability, and integration capabilities that don't require custom coding every time we add a new process. Catherine paused, studying both visitors carefully. "But here's the thing. Every vendor who's pitched us has focused on their technology capabilities without understanding our business model. They want to sell us their solution and make it our problem to figure out how to implement it." "That's not how we approach client partnerships," Rachel said. "Our job is to understand your business requirements and design solutions that fit your operational model, not force you to adapt to our technology preferences." Partnerships. Catherine repeated the word with slight emphasis. "That's what you called it on the phone. Most sales teams talk about vendor relationships or client services. Why partnerships?" Michael and Rachel exchanged glances. This was the moment that would determine whether Reynolds Logistics became another transactional relationship or something more substantial. Rachel chose honesty. Because successful technology implementations require ongoing collaboration between people who understand the business needs and people who understand the technical capabilities. If we're just vendors selling you products, we're incentivized to close deals and move on. If we're partners, we're incentivized to ensure your long-term success. Catherine's smile was the first genuine warmth Rachel had seen from her. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." Too many technology companies treat implementation as the end of their responsibility, rather than the beginning of the relationship. The next 2 hours were spent in detailed technical discussions, with Michael and Catherine diving deep into architecture requirements, integration challenges, and scalability planning. Rachel found herself serving as translator between business needs and technical solutions, helping both sides understand the practical implications of various approaches. As the meeting concluded, Catherine walked them to the elevator. "I'll be honest, this is the most substantive conversation we've had with any potential vendor. You're asking the right questions, and you seem to understand that this isn't just about buying software." "What's your timeline for making a decision?" Rachel asked. "Ideally, we'd like to have a solution in place within 6 months. But I'd rather take longer and get it right than rush into something that creates more problems than it solves." Catherine paused. "I assume you'll need time to develop a comprehensive proposal?" 2 weeks for initial recommendations, another 2 weeks for detailed implementation planning, Rachel replied. "But I'd like to schedule regular check-ins during that process to make sure we're addressing your evolving needs." "Perfect. I'll look forward to seeing what you develop." During the drive back to TechForward, Michael was unusually quiet. Finally, he spoke. "Rachel, do you realize what we're looking at? Full infrastructure replacement, custom integration requirements, ongoing support and development. This could be a $2 million implementation, maybe more." "I know. Victoria's going to notice a deal this size. She's going to want to insert herself into the process." Rachel had been thinking about the same issue. A $2 million deal would be impossible to hide, and Victoria would undoubtedly try to claim credit for any success while positioning herself to blame Rachel for any failure. But the conversation with Catherine had reinforced something important. This client valued substance over politics, genuine expertise over corporate maneuvering. "Let her try," Rachel said. "Catherine Reynolds didn't get to be CTO by being impressed with sales presentations and corporate hierarchies. She wants partners who can deliver results, not managers who can deliver PowerPoint slides." "You're betting your career on this deal." "I'm betting my career on the idea that doing things the right way eventually produces better results than taking shortcuts." Rachel's voice carried the certainty of someone who'd made her decision. "Catherine Reynolds wants a genuine partnership with people who understand her business needs. That's exactly what we're going to provide." But even as she spoke, Rachel was aware that the stakes had just increased dramatically. The Reynolds deal would validate her approach or destroy her position at TechForward. There would be no middle ground, no opportunity for partial success or strategic retreat. Victoria Sterling had demanded proof that relationship-based selling could generate significant results. Catherine Reynolds had just provided the opportunity to deliver that proof. The war was about to enter its decisive phase. The signature on the contract was still drying when Rachel felt the familiar surge of vindication, the same satisfaction she'd experienced after successfully coordinating complex supply operations under impossible deadlines. Catherine Reynolds had signed the agreement for a $2.1 million implementation, the largest single deal in TechForward's history, and she'd done it after a presentation that emphasized partnership over profit margins, long-term value over short-term gains. "Congratulations," Catherine said, her handshake firm with genuine respect. "I have to admit, I was skeptical when you first contacted us. Most sales representatives promise partnership and deliver vendor relationships. You've delivered exactly what you promised." Michael Torres beamed with the satisfaction of someone whose technical expertise had been properly valued. The past 3 weeks of intensive collaboration had produced a solution that addressed Reynolds Logistics' core challenges while providing scalability for future growth. More importantly, they'd built the foundation for an ongoing relationship that could generate additional revenue for years to come. "This is just the beginning," Rachel replied. "Implementation partnerships require constant communication and adjustment. We'll be working together for months to ensure everything integrates properly. I'm looking forward to it. And Rachel? When this implementation succeeds, I'll be recommending your approach to other CTOs in my network." Genuine partnerships are rare in this industry. The drive back to TechForward felt different than the previous weeks of nervous anticipation. Rachel had proof, undeniable, quantifiable proof, that her methods could generate results that exceeded even Victoria's aggressive targets. The $1 million contract represented more than just a successful sale. It was validation of everything she'd tried to build during her 3 years at the company. "You realize this changes everything," Michael said as they pulled into the TechForward parking lot. "Largest deal in company history, closed using relationship-based methods." Victoria can't dismiss this as small-time thinking. Rachel nodded, but something in her military training was sending warning signals. Victory often created new vulnerabilities, and she'd learned to be most cautious during moments of apparent triumph. Victoria Sterling hadn't risen to VP level by gracefully accepting defeat, especially not from subordinates who'd publicly challenged her authority. The TechForward lobby felt different as they walked through it, employees looking at them with newfound respect, conversations stopping as they passed. Word had already spread through the company's informal networks. By the time they reached the sales floor, Amanda Foster was waiting by Rachel's office, her expression unreadable. "Congratulations on the Reynolds deal," Amanda said, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone choosing her words carefully. $2.1 million. That's impressive. "Thank you. Victoria wants to see you in her office. Immediately." Rachel had expected this summons, but Amanda's tone suggested something beyond a simple congratulatory meeting. There was tension in the air, the kind of charged atmosphere that preceded corporate confrontations. She followed Amanda through the maze of cubicles, aware that their progress was being monitored by colleagues who understood the political implications of this moment. Victoria's office was a shrine to aggressive sales culture. Awards, plaques, photographs of company events where she stood prominently at the center of group shots. She was standing behind her desk when Rachel entered, her posture rigid with barely controlled emotion. "Close the door," Victoria said without preamble. Her voice carried the cold precision of someone who'd decided to abandon any pretense of professional courtesy. "Sit down." Rachel remained standing. "Is there a problem with the Reynolds contract?" "The problem is that you've been conducting unauthorized sales activities without proper oversight." Victoria's words came out in a rush, as if she'd been rehearsing them. "The Reynolds deal should have been escalated to my level weeks ago. A $2 million implementation requires VP approval before any commitments are made to the client. I followed standard procedures. The contract was reviewed by legal and approved by. Standard procedures don't apply to deals of this magnitude." Victoria's interruption was sharp. "You've potentially compromised this company's relationship with its largest client by making promises you're not authorized to make." Rachel felt the familiar chill of recognition. This was how institutional betrayal began, with accusations designed to transform success into failure, competence into liability. Victoria was following a playbook Rachel had seen before, in military contexts where threatened superiors eliminated subordinates who made them look bad. "What specific promises are you concerned about?" "Partnership commitments. Ongoing support agreements. Custom development work that wasn't properly scoped." Victoria's list sounded prepared, scripted. "Catherine Reynolds is under the impression that she's purchased a level of service that we haven't properly costed or planned for." The contract clearly outlines all deliverables and support commitments. Legal approved every clause. Legal approved what you presented to them. But did you disclose the full scope of promises made during your sales process? Victoria's question was a trap, designed to create doubt about Rachel's honesty, regardless of her answer. Rachel realized with sudden clarity that this confrontation had been planned before she'd even returned to the office. Victoria had spent the time since learning about the contract developing a strategy to undermine its success, to transform Rachel's achievement into a liability that threatened company operations. "Every commitment made to Catherine Reynolds is documented in our meeting notes and reflected in the contract terms," Rachel said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "If you have specific concerns about deliverables, I'm happy to review them with you." Victoria's smile was sharp with satisfaction. "I've already initiated a full review of your sales process with this client. I want to understand exactly what promises were made and whether they align with company capabilities." "A full review? Complete audit of all communications, meetings, and commitments. I've asked Amanda to take the lead on this review, reporting directly to me." Victoria's words carried the weight of a death sentence. Until this review is complete, you're removed from the Reynolds account. The room seemed to tilt. Rachel had expected resistance, but this was complete corporate warfare, the systematic destruction of her professional relationship with her most important client. You can't do that. Catherine Reynolds specifically requested to work with our team. Catherine Reynolds is working with TechForward Solutions, not with Rachel Mitchell personally. She'll understand that account management decisions are made at the appropriate organizational level. Victoria's tone suggested the conversation was over. Amanda will be reaching out to schedule a transition meeting. Rachel felt the familiar tactical analysis kicking in. Assess the situation, identify objectives, determine available options. Victoria's strategy was clear. Isolate Rachel from her success, control the narrative about the deal's development, and position herself as the responsible executive who'd rescued a potentially problematic situation. This is about control, not client service, Rachel said quietly. This is about proper corporate governance and accountability. Victoria's response was immediate, rehearsed. Your methods may have generated results, but they've also created risks that need to be managed by someone with appropriate experience. Someone like you. Someone like me. The confrontation ended with Rachel's dismissal from Victoria's office, but the war had just escalated to a new level. As she walked back through the sales floor, Rachel was acutely aware that every conversation, every glance, every interaction was being evaluated through the lens of corporate politics. Her colleagues now saw her not as the person who'd closed the largest deal in company history, but as someone whose methods had been deemed problematic by senior leadership. Michael Torres was waiting by her office, his expression grim. Amanda already called me. I'm being reassigned to support the Reynolds account transition. He air-quoted the phrase with obvious disgust. Rachel, this is insane. Catherine Reynolds specifically requested to work with us. Victoria's making this about corporate governance and risk management. She's positioning my success as a potential liability that requires senior oversight. Rachel sank into her desk chair, the weight of the situation settling over her. She's going to take credit for the deal while making sure I can't build on the relationship. Catherine's not going to accept this. She valued our partnership approach. Catherine's a corporate CTO. She understands organizational hierarchies and the need to work within established chains of command. Rachel's voice carried the bitter recognition of political reality. If Victoria presents this as a routine account management decision, Catherine will have to accept it. But even as she spoke, Rachel was thinking about James Parker's warnings about TechForward's toxic culture. Victoria's response to success wasn't celebration or recognition, it was immediate action to neutralize any threat to her authority. The Reynolds deal had proven that relationship-based selling could generate unprecedented results, which made it dangerous to a leadership structure built on different principles. What are you going to do? Michael asked. Rachel stared at the contract on her desk. $2. $1 million in revenue. The validation she'd sought. The proof that her methods could compete with anyone's. But Victoria Sterling had just demonstrated that success without political approval was worse than failure, because it threatened the existing power structure. I'm going to document everything, Rachel said finally. Every meeting, every commitment, every decision. If Victoria wants to audit my sales process, she's going to discover that my methods are not just effective, they're completely ethical and fully documented. But even as she spoke, Rachel knew that documentation wouldn't be enough. Victoria had escalated beyond simple corporate politics into active sabotage. The war for Rachel's professional survival was about to become a battle for the soul of TechForward Solutions itself. Catherine Reynolds' voice on the phone carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to cutting through corporate nonsense, but Rachel detected an underlying tension that suggested TechForward's, quote, routine account transition hadn't been as smoothly received as Victoria had anticipated. I'm calling because I've received some concerning information during my due diligence review, Catherine said, without preamble. Information that raises questions about TechForward's representation of previous client successes. Rachel's stomach tightened. She was sitting in her car outside a Starbucks in Buckhead, having taken Catherine's call away from the office where every conversation might be monitored. The past week of being sidelined from the Reynolds account had been professional purgatory, watching Amanda Foster fumble through technical discussions she didn't understand, while Victoria positioned herself as the executive who'd rescued a potentially problematic situation. "What kind of concerns?" Rachel asked. "I had my team verify some of the case studies and client references that were part of your original presentation. Standard practice for implementations of this size." Catherine's pause carried weight. 3 of the 5 client references provided contact information for people who no longer work at those companies. When I reached the actual IT directors, their descriptions of TechForward's performance were significantly different from what was documented in your materials. Quote. Rachel felt the cold certainty of recognition. Different how? Missed deadlines, cost overruns, ongoing support issues that weren't resolved. One client described their TechForward implementation as, quote, functional but problematic, requiring constant maintenance and custom patches. Catherine's voice carried the careful precision of someone documenting evidence. Another said they wouldn't recommend TechForward for any future projects. The implications were staggering. If TechForward's marketing materials contained falsified client testimonials, the Reynolds deal could be jeopardized, along with Rachel's professional reputation. But more immediately concerning was the realization that Victoria's success metrics were built on systematically misleading representations of client satisfaction. "Catherine, I need you to know that I had no knowledge of any discrepancies in our client references. The materials I presented were provided by our marketing department and represented as accurate. I believe you. Your approach during our sales process was consistently honest and substantive. That's why these discrepancies are so troubling." Catherine paused. "Rachel, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Are you aware of any other irregularities in TechForward's sales practices?" The question hung between them like a bridge over an abyss. Rachel could provide a careful, politically safe response that protected her position while avoiding potential legal complications. Or she could tell Catherine what James Parker had shared about the systematic corruption that had prompted his departure from TechForward. "I'm aware of concerns about the company's sales culture," Rachel said carefully. "Concerns that were shared with me by a former executive who left because of ethical disagreements with certain practices. Would this former executive be willing to discuss those concerns with me? I can't speak for him, but I believe he'd be interested in ensuring that clients receive accurate information about vendor capabilities." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "Rachel, I want you to understand something. Reynolds Logistics isn't just purchasing software. We're betting our company's future on the assumption that TechForward can deliver what it promises. If there are systematic problems with how this company represents its capabilities, I need to know before we move forward with implementation." "I understand completely." "Good. Because I'm going to conduct a more thorough review of TechForward's practices and client relationships. And I want you to be part of that process, regardless of what your management has decided about account assignments." The call ended with an agreement to meet the following day, but Rachel remained in her car, staring at the busy intersection while processing the implications of Catherine's discoveries. The falsified client testimonials weren't just unethical, they were potentially fraudulent, representing a systematic effort to mislead clients about TechForward's actual performance record. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael Torres. "Need to talk. Coffee shop on Peachtree. Now." Rachel found Michael in a corner booth, his usually composed demeanor replaced by obvious agitation. He looked like someone who discovered that his fundamental assumptions about his employer were wrong. "They're asking me to lie," he said without preamble. "About the Reynolds implementation timeline, about our technical capabilities, about the level of ongoing support we can provide." "Who's asking you to lie?" "Amanda Foster, on Victoria's instructions. They want me to revise the technical specifications to make the implementation appear less complex than it actually is." Michael's voice carried the outrage of someone whose professional integrity was being directly challenged. They're concerned that Catherine Reynolds might get cold feet if she understands the full scope of what's required. Rachel felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. What specifically are they asking you to change? Integration timeline from 6 months to 4 months. Custom development requirements from extensive to minimal. Ongoing support from dedicated team to standard service level. Michael's list came out in a rush. "Rachel, if we make these commitments to Catherine, we'll be setting up the implementation for failure. Have you documented these requests? Everything. Emails, meeting notes, recorded phone calls. Michael's expression was grim. But I don't know what to do with the documentation. If I refuse to make the changes, they'll fire me. If I make them, I'll be complicit in defrauding our biggest client. Rachel thought about James Parker's decision to leave TechForward rather than participate in unethical practices. Michael was facing the same choice, but with less experience and fewer options. She also thought about Catherine Reynolds' investigation into TechForward's client references and the systematic pattern of misrepresentation it had revealed. Michael, what if I told you that Catherine Reynolds has already discovered discrepancies in our client testimonials? That she's conducting her own investigation into TechForward's practices? I'd say that explains why Victoria is so desperate to control the narrative about this deal. Michael paused, his technical mind working through the implications. Rachel, if Catherine discovers that we've been systematically misrepresenting our capabilities, she won't just cancel the Reynolds contract. She'll make sure every CTO in her network knows about TechForward's practices, which would destroy the company's reputation and potentially expose everyone involved to legal liability. Exactly. Michael leaned forward, his voice dropping. What are we going to do? Rachel had been asking herself the same question since Catherine's phone call. The ethical choice was clear. Provide Catherine with complete information about TechForward's practices and support her investigation, regardless of the personal consequences. But the practical implications were enormous. Exposing the systematic corruption would likely end her career at TechForward and potentially result in legal retaliation. We're going to tell Catherine Reynolds the truth, Rachel said finally. All of it. The falsified testimonials, the pressure to misrepresent technical capabilities, the systematic pattern of prioritizing deals over client success. That's career suicide. Maybe? But staying silent makes us complicit in defrauding clients who trust us to provide honest assessments of our capabilities. Rachel's voice carried the certainty of someone who'd made her decision. Michael, I've been in situations where the choice was between personal safety and doing the right thing. I learned that you have to be able to live with the consequences of your choices. Michael was quiet for a long moment, his internal struggle visible in his expression. Finally, he nodded. What do you need from me? Everything you've documented about the pressure to misrepresent the Reynolds implementation. Every email, every recorded conversation, every meeting note. Rachel's voice carried the tactical precision of someone planning a military operation. Catherine Reynolds is conducting an investigation into TechForward's practices. We're going to make sure she has all the information she needs to reach the right conclusions. The war with Victoria Sterling was about to become something much larger. A battle for accountability and ethical practices in an industry built on trust between vendors and clients. Rachel Mitchell had been forced to choose between complicity and conscience. She'd chosen conscience. Now she had to live with the consequences. The manila folder on Rachel's kitchen table contained the evidence of systematic corporate fraud, falsified client testimonials, doctored performance metrics, recorded conversations where senior executives explicitly instructed subordinates to misrepresent capabilities to clients. 3 weeks of careful documentation had revealed a pattern of corruption that extended far beyond her personal conflict with Victoria Sterling. David sat across from her, his pediatric nurse training evident in how he processed information that revealed institutional harm. He'd been quiet while Rachel explained the scope of what she'd discovered, but his expression grew increasingly troubled as the implications became clear. This isn't just about your job anymore, he said finally. This is about a company systematically defrauding clients who trust them with multi-million-dollar investments. I know. And you're planning to give this information to Catherine Reynolds. She's already conducting her own investigation. This documentation would provide context for what she's discovering independently. Rachel's voice carried the careful precision of someone who'd thought through every implication. David, I can't be complicit in defrauding clients. Not when I have evidence that could prevent them from being harmed. David reached across the table, his hand covering hers. I understand your position, but I need you to understand mine. If you expose this corruption, TechForward will retaliate. They'll claim you're a disgruntled employee, making false accusations. They'll destroy your reputation and make it impossible for you to work in enterprise sales. The words hit harder than Rachel had expected, not because she disagreed with David's assessment, but because they forced her to confront the personal cost of her ethical stance. 3 years of building a career in civilian sales, destroyed by a single decision to prioritize client welfare over personal survival. What's the alternative? Stay silent while clients get defrauded? The alternative is finding a way to address the corruption through proper channels: HR, corporate compliance, regulatory authorities. Michael for technical oversight, and I'd like you to serve as the strategic relationship manager. Rachel looked at Jonathan, who was listening to the speakerphone with obvious satisfaction. Another multi-million-dollar implementation, built on the foundation of trust and genuine partnership that had emerged from the crisis with Victoria Sterling. "We'll make it happen," Rachel said. Same approach, same commitment to transparency and realistic expectations. After Catherine hung up, Jonathan remained in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Rachel, I have a proposal for you. The board has been discussing expansion into the European market. We need someone to lead that initiative, someone who understands relationship-based selling and can establish our reputation in markets where trust is even more critical than it is here." The offer was tempting in ways that went beyond professional advancement. European expansion would mean building TechForward's ethical practices into new markets from the ground up, creating a model that could influence industry standards internationally. But it would also mean extensive travel during the early stages of her pregnancy. "Can I have some time to discuss this with David? The timing is complicated." "Of course. But Rachel, I want you to know that whatever you decide, TechForward is committed to supporting your career development in ways that work for your life situation." The conversation ended with Rachel's promise to provide an answer within a week, but she was already thinking about the broader implications of her choice. The war with Victoria Sterling had been about more than personal survival. It had been about proving that ethical practices could compete with corruption in corporate sales. The success of TechForward's transformation had validated that thesis. As she prepared to leave the office, Rachel reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 18 months ago, she'd been a mid-level account manager fighting for professional survival. Now she was shaping corporate policy and influencing industry practices, while building the kind of career that aligned with her values, rather than contradicting them. The view from her office window showed Atlanta's skyline stretching toward the horizon, full of possibilities that hadn't existed during Victoria Sterling's reign of psychological warfare. Rachel Mitchell had learned that the most important battles weren't always fought with weapons or corporate politics. Sometimes they were fought with documentation, integrity, and the willingness to choose conscience over convenience. Her phone buzzed with another text from David. "Whatever news you got today, I'm proud of you. See you at dinner?" Rachel smiled, gathering her things for the short drive home to her husband, her future, and the family they were about to start building. The war was over. The future was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.